Hello and welcome everybody. I'm Paul Milsatich, Assistant Superintendent of the Aurora City School District, with the first episode of my podcast, which is not yet named. I guess we'll just call it Paul's podcast at this point in time. This podcast will be sort of periodic, not necessarily having a regular schedule on an as-needed basis. And today we're going to focus on Google Classroom, and I have my first guest that we're going to interview, and that's Mrs. Toni Taylor from Aurora High School, senior and sophomore English teacher. Toni, welcome and thank you for being with me today.
Hi, thanks for having me. I'm excited to share.
Absolutely, and that exactly is the point right there with this podcast and this episode, is just to share some strategies and share some things that are going on around the district that I think will be helpful for others. And so before we get into the interview and you sort of showing and telling, Toni, I do want to give a little background. So last year, obviously when the school buildings shut down and we had to go remote, we pushed forward a little bit more with Google Classroom. So Google Classroom is a tool that we've used in the district for many years. I know you've used it. You were an early adopter and you've used it for maybe even before I was the high school principal. So maybe 5 or 6 years it's been around. Some folks have used it a shorter amount of time. And, really last year when we had to go remote learning with COVID, it became our official platform in grades 3 through 12, and definitely even more consistent this year. So that would be at Layton, Harmon, and the high school. Google Classroom is the main sort of communication tool with students and organizationally, but also, with families that teachers use. And so we evolved some, and we're a little bit more consistent. And so that's sort of the purpose today, is because we're using this so much more consistently, and because we have our Plan B families, and because of the feedback, wanted to just have you share some of your strategies, because when I was the principal at Aurora High School, I know that I got a lot of positive feedback from students and from families about the way in which you use it. And we have a lot of teachers using it, but there's also different ways to use Classroom. So I was hoping to have you share sort of how you differentiate between the announcements, then also the classwork, and then also integrate that with Google Calendar, which I think is another great tool and really helpful tool that we'll be showing our audience, which is staff members, but also students and their families. So, Toni, why don't you share your screen and we will have you take it away. The spotlight will be yours.
All right. All right, so this is just one of my Google Classrooms. So I make a Google Classroom for each one of my sections of classes and the periods I have throughout the day. So this is just one of my classrooms for my senior classes. And I use the stream mostly just for announcements for them. So I post my daily agendas and my weekly agendas. I just put not random, but announcements on here for them. Of just, hey, things to think of. Hey, don't forget this. But I use this for mostly announcements and agendas. So that's what I really use the stream for. Where I get organized then is with the classwork area. So the classwork column of Google Classroom is really nice because you can categorize your assignments and your materials and all your resources. And even what's a nice feature that Google Classroom has is the sidebar on the left, where students can click on something. So if they're writing a paper, they can click into writing resources, and they'll see everything that I've ever posted and affiliated or chosen that topic of the writing resources. But what's nice is that you can also see due dates. If their things are assignments or projects, I can assign due dates to it, which then correlates then with students' calendars.
And let's just pause right there before you get to the calendar part. So that really is the advantage. I mean, the stream is great, but the problem is after you give that announcement or add it, it just drops, lower and lower and lower, and it's kind of lost, and it's hard to keep track of all that. Whereas everything in the classwork, then, like you said, you've got to the teacher can organize it however they want, but you can organize it by units. It's always there. It's always organized that way, and a student can go back to it and refer to anything at any point, correct?
Yes. So in the stream, when you post anything in the stream, it automatically pushes things down. So things can be hidden in here unless you physically go in and I could say move to top, but that's really it. There's not a lot of movement in here. That's why I just use it for announcements and reminders to my students. But then in the classwork area is really where you can organize your assignments and resources for your students. And where it's actually easy for the students to access the information. So with assignments that have due dates, this is what's nice a feature for in Google Classroom is that when students go to view their calendar, now mine's going to look different because I have the teacher view. But if teachers put assignments in with due dates, then it will populate into the student's Google Calendar of all of their classes for any teacher who puts assignments in with due dates. So for my view, anything that's blue is my senior English, anything that's black is my creative writing class, and anything that's green is my sophomore class. So I can see what I've posted, but again, for students' view who have teachers that post assignment due dates, theirs is going to be color coded with the class that it is, and actually have more on their calendar because they'll have more than just the one class view that I have.
And I imagine, as being a learner, you can either, get all those notifications via email, or if this is being utilized, they can just go to their calendar and they can look ahead at this week, the next week, and they can see any projects, any assignments, any tests, quizzes, whatever. As long as it has a due date, it's in the calendar. So this is really a tremendous organizational resource, both for teachers, but also our learners.
Yes. So even I just flipped ahead to my next couple weeks. And so it's still, the due dates are still in there. So again, anything that you assign with the due date, then you'll be able to view it on your calendar. So it's really nice for students to see. This feature is also in a way visible on the stream. On the stream, they can see it on the left where it says upcoming. So for my seniors, there's nothing due this week for them. But they can always do to view all, and for them, it'll link to their calendar.
Yeah, and I think of in the past, so, Harmon with the homework hotline, or even at the high school and maybe other buildings in terms of having those little agendas with those planners, and, the students have to get those out and kind of write down their assignments and due dates, or things might need to have been added to the homework hotline so parents could check in. To me, it seems as if that's pretty much antiquated if we get really consistent with this tool and all the due dates are there. And not to say you can't write stuff down, because some people prefer that. But this really gives another tool that can organize all of us.
Right, because I have a lot of students who do have it then associated with their phone calendar. So it goes right, they can access it on there too. So when teachers do make assignments, they have the option then to put that due date in there, and they can even do a time. So once you do a due date, say if I make a due date, you can also give a time stamp to it or when you want it in by. And then you can also categorize it. You can create different topics. But this is, I found, very helpful to students to organize it this way so they can easily find the information and resources that their teachers have posted.
Yeah, that's great. And I know very helpful. And you've probably received that type of feedback from your students about that, correct?
Yeah, it's very nice. Yes.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. Well, Toni, is there anything that I should have asked you about Google Calendar, the organization of Google Classroom? Anything that would be helpful for our viewers? Or do you think we covered it all?
No, I think we covered it all. It's really nice for students to organize and find what they need easily with the due dates associated with their Google Calendars.
Yeah, and as you and I both know, and everybody knows, that can be a challenge, right? Just that organization and tracking of everything can be a challenge, and this is just a great resource, a great tool when we use it that way. That will really help us and our learners going forward. So, Mrs. Taylor, thank you for being the first guest on this podcast. Really appreciate you hanging out with me for a few minutes today.
Sure. Thanks again for asking me.
Yeah, and everybody else, thank you for being a viewer today. And everybody have a good one. Take it easy.